Welcome to Software Sundays Builders. This is a space where we share real conversations about technology and the types of impact that it has inside of our community. And we help you figure out how you can help lead what's going to happen next. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for being here. You are in the right place. If you've been rocking with us for a minute, it's good to see you back. Let's do it again. Uh, Before we get started, I do want to just share a few announcements. First, happy birthday to my cousin Cache. Uh, I believe you're turning 27 this year. Um, Happy birthday to you. I am very proud of the woman that you are becoming. It's always funny to think about how we were when we were younger, and then looking fast forward today and just seeing how, intelligent, how kind, and how just amazing that you are. And you have always been, but it's just cool to see that and for us to continue to have that relationship even as we are continuing to grow and get older. So happy birthday to you. I hope your birthday goes amazing. I hope this year ahead goes better than every year before and that you continue to grow like wine. Just getting finer every year. Um Also, it is Black History Month still. So everybody just show some pride. If you wanna in the community, make sure you are respecting yourself, respecting your brothers and your sisters. Make sure that we are showing pride for our people and everything that we do and have done and will continue to do because we are a great people and we deserve some love this month, this day, this year, ever. Like, just always remember that whether it's February, March, August, whatever, make sure you're doing what's right for you and your community because it's we don't need no more nonsense, for real. um and quick disclaimer, Software Sundays is for informational purposes only. The information that we share uh is not professional advice. The views expressed are my own and those of the individuals quoted and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Build Learn Impact or their or their affiliates. Uh, Topics may or may not apply to your specific situation. So please consult a professional for your own legal, business, or tax advice before making any decisions based on information found in this show. And with that being said, let's jump in. So, oh, uh, interesting stories this week. There is a lot going on in technology inside of the market and market being the economy in general, and there's a lot of change going on. One of the most interesting things that I saw was that there were three engineers that have been indicted for stealing secrets from Google. Those secrets were allegedly shared with Iran, and they included information about specific crypto, yeah, specific cryptography practices and algorithms for system on chip designs. System on chip architecture and designs are used in very high tech devices. I'll say very high tech, your phone, laptops, these types of devices. Those SoC chips are what allow us to have more improved compute inside of smaller devices. Now, these same designs and these same chips can be used to create weapons. They can be used to create IoT devices and not a whole host of different technologies that require really advanced chips in small sizes. Like, and as you know, last year Nvidia couldn't even sell some of their GPU chips to China. And now there are more different types of chips besides GPUs. GPUs are heavily used for training and running AI workloads, but there are a number of use cases for these SoC chips, like I mentioned. The risk and the reason why this is so important is that we're seeing the hardware infrastructure that technology is running on, that the software that we're building is running on. That hardware layer is becoming state property. It's becoming national secrets, national property, to the point where last year you couldn't get a GPU in China. You couldn't get a GPU sent to Russia or to one of these other countries that are on the no-fly list. When we start seeing like literally spies coming in from other countries because they cannot get the technology themselves, like they can't purchase it, so they are sending spies to come and take it. That is literally showing you how important this technology is. It's important from a political national standpoint, but it's important from a just economic standpoint. The countries and the companies that control this technology are key to the critical infrastructure that we rely on each day. If you're thinking about the future of the economy and physical AI and even software AI, if we ever do get to AGI, all of these advancements are going to run on advanced compute, advanced chips. These designs are being hoarded at this point, like oil was back in the 20th century. They're being hoarded as national secrets, national treasures. And that's important for all of us to understand. When I say the impact that this technology has on our community, I mean that. There are entire wars being fought behind some of the technology that exists in our phone. Most of it, it's not very simple to just decompose and say, I'm gonna take this iPad or take this phone and I can figure out how to recreate this technology. There are companies, there are nations that are trying to do that, but it's not easy. But if you can get access to the company that built it, if you could get your hands on that IP from the whole blueprint, the whole process to design it, your manufacturers where you go to get it, like that's kind of public information. You know the fabs are in Taiwan. You know the fabs are created inside of the Netherlands with ASML. But you don't have the source to put it all together. When you get the fabs, when you get the designers of the chips, and then you get the chip designs themselves, that's when you really got a problem on your hands in terms of not being able to stop the competition. Because that's what this whole war is. That's what this whole effort to keep these designs and keep this technology away from these countries is about. It's about making sure that your enemies, political enemies, China, economic enemies, Iran, Russia, these enemies are not able to access the technology that we have so that we can actually compete against them. They got us in terms of construction, they got us in terms of the population size, the speed of their development, and even just the economies of scale. They have a significantly larger number of factories and infrastructure that can build almost anything. If they were to have the supply chain locked up to build the technology that we are the only ones that can build, it becomes a greater risk to national security. I think this is super interesting from a just a professional standpoint because you may be working at Google. You may be working at an industry like a Chase, JP Morgan. You may be working inside of a manufacturing company like Siemens, however you pronounce their name, or even a automotive company. These companies, they don't seem like national treasures. Nvidia probably does, but they don't seem like they're the key to national security. But if you dig a little deeper, they are. A lot of the technology that they are operating, like Google controlling the world's information through search and having cloud like GCP, having their different moonshot projects like Waymo, deep not DeepSeek, uh, DeepMind, and these different projects where they are literally pushing the bounds of what we know and what we can do with what we know, and then owning the infrastructure that people rely on every day. That becomes something that you can't easily replace. And it becomes something that if somebody, an enemy or an adversary, were to get a like a chink, some type of vulnerability, see something in the armor, and they took advantage of that, that could become a very serious problem for everyday citizens. That could become a serious problem for the government and just the way we organize and hold information. Imagine if imagine if it became common knowledge on how to hack into the hardware on your phones and your devices. There are ways to do it, and le- uh, there are constant efforts and new vulnerabilities found every day. But those are people that are finding vulnerabilities without having the full blueprint. Imagine what you could do with the blueprint, and imagine how difficult it would be to actually combat these threats if they had the blueprint and they had the vulnerability. And it's not like you could just tweak the blueprint a little bit to get rid of that vulnerability. You would have to start from scratch to be able to really keep them out. And starting from scratch is going to take too much time. That entire span of time between the breach and when you can actually deploy something new without using that old architecture, that whole time they was gonna make a mess out of everything they had access to. So this is something that you got to think about. Um, one, because it really does directly involve everyone, and two, this is the opportunity, right? The opportunity is not to go into Google and steal their designs, but there's a reason why a country is sending agents to this side of the world to go get some information. There's a reason why it's worth so much to us internally as a country to keep that information from being leaked. There's a reason why Google has an entire team in place that is monitoring the data being accessed inside of their company, not just being transferred. They're monitoring every click that you made, every download that you had. They're monitoring every IP address that you connected to because they all understand how important the technology is that they are working on. We as individuals, we as professionals, we as a community need to understand the types of battles happening all around us. We need to be able to mindfully enter those battlefields and understand, all right, this is the information I need in order to play my role in the battle. I'm not saying all of us are going to be able to secure the data and that same person is able to create a design for a GPU or a NPU or a TLU. Like, I'm not saying on any of that. If you really dig deep enough, you'll find that all of these technologies, all of these breakthroughs are really in very vast areas of technology as a whole. But we need more people that understand what's going on in these spaces. because it's going on. It's going on every day. Like the initial breach happened back in 2023, I believe. That's when the files were initially uh, discovered that they were being accessed. And today is when, or this year is when the actual indictment happened. But that same pattern is happening in different industries. Again, I mentioned Chase, but the financial industry, manufacturing, energy, all of these infrastructures are developing technology that is critical for society. And if you're not understanding that, if you think you're just writing code, or if you think you're just, you know, writing a process or documenting some process, auditing some notes, you're not understanding that there is a literal war going on behind the scenes. So keep that in mind, and act accordingly, move accordingly. In addition to that, kind of one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that we're seeing that type of warfare going on from a infrastructure, uh, technology standpoint is the fact that different technologies, or in this story, political tensions are driving data sovereignty pushes. But a lot of that tension and the sovereignty is built around AI today. Back in the 90s, GPUs, well, GPUs were still pretty new, but even CPUs and the technology necessary to design those and build those, that has always been heavily regulated and heavily and kept secret. There's always been spies for at least the last 40 years for this technology. But we're starting to see, but in that time, in the early 2000s, 90s, even into the 2010s, there was still a significant amount of globalization. There was still an effort for all of these different political blocks to actually work together, come together, peace all in the air. That's what we was talking about, peace. But in 2025 and a few years before, we started seeing that globalization not breaking completely, but you're seeing there's more tension. You're seeing tighter alliances, right? We're seeing different alliances that were, in place for years, now starting to break up a little bit more, just because of different ideologies that are driving different cultures in their own direction. That pattern is continuing today, and that pattern is turning into calls for greater data sovereignty. Data sovereignty literally just means, or it asks you the question, who owns the data? How do I know they own it? Where are they keeping it? What are they doing with that data? And why does it matter? The why does it matter part is really AI at this point. Once we got big data and you could store terabytes, like terabytes times terabytes of data, then it opened up the door to machine learning and big data where you could actually create a prediction based on some real world information. When you take more of that data, more processing, and dump it together, then you got AI where we could actually generate new data, whether that be images or text or videos, even sounds today. That's how we got to AI and generative AI the way we know it today. A lot of these breakthroughs would not have happened with the data sovereignty laws that we have in place today. Some of those laws include GDPR, and they include the I think GDPR is in Europe, and California Data Privacy Act. They have their own Data Privacy Act out here in the States. But that shift in data sovereignty and the fact that AI is becoming something that is actually going to put a divide between this person and that person is why it's becoming a political concern today. Hackers, the fact that they are getting bolder, they are actively holding data hostage from hospitals to government agencies to banks and even consumer companies. Hackers are becoming a problem that's costing the entire economy, the GDP, the global GDP, billions of dollars each year. This is no longer just a question of are you storing the data and do you have encryption in place? It's becoming, all right, you have encryption in place, but what are you what are you encrypting and why are you storing it? Where are you using it at? It becomes a question of do you have the data being processed here? Is it does the data belong to people that live in this country? If it not, it needs to go somewhere else, or it can't be stored outside of the country of origin for the people whose data it is. It becomes, are you being clear with the users of that data, the owners of that data, what actually you're doing with the data? And you have different requirements in place. You can't just store data without understanding what you're going to do with it. And you can't start doing something with data that you have not made clear to everyone that you were going to start doing this with that data. And this is creating more challenges, but also more opportunities for global companies. These companies are having to now not just figure out how to run their business and not just figure out how to run operations. Now they're figuring out how to run operations in the United States or in the Americas differently than they are running it inside of Latin America or inside of the EU in Europe. You're looking at different requirements for what you can do with the data inside of Europe versus what you can do with it inside of the US. And these different compliance rules are requiring greater number of effort to actually comply, right? You can't just assume you're in compliance. You actually have to check it. You have to audit it. And then you have to, if you're not in place, you have to create functions inside of your business to actually make sure you are staying up to date with new changes in these policies because they change all the time too. Like it's not like the requirement for what you can do with the data today is going to be the same way it is next year. A different administration could actually change what you can do with that data and where you can do it at. So you have to be you have to create processes and functions in your business to actually live with those changes as they happen. So it's a really good opportunity for people that are interested in, I would say, public policy, because it part of it is public policy, but also interested in technology and data security, interested in understanding how to implement some of the requirements that are being given from a policy level. Because the policy just says high level, this is what we need you to do, this is how we need you to do it, but it doesn't actually give you an implementation path to actually accomplishing those goals. That process, that path forward is something that we still require engineers and still require thought leaders and professionals to do, to own, and to operate. And that's an opportunity. You can get into that if you're interested in that side of technology and industry. Additionally, I did want to just touch on the story about why CEOs AI hype isn't landing well with employees. And I say landing well, there are, I think in 2026, there are like two types of people. There are some people who are very excited about AI and are really excited about what AI and automation are going to do for business and the economy and just the world and society in general. And then there are people that are really nervous and uh, scared, frankly, about AI and what it means for them, what it means for their children and their lifestyle and all these other things. And I honestly believe that both of these groups are correct. They're totally right in thinking about AI and technology the way that they're thinking about it. Because while on one hand, automation and AI and technology can definitely increase productivity, it can definitely make life easier for most people. There is a truth in displacement. There is truth in the fact that there are people that have skills that are really not needed once you have a computer in place to do that job. And how you deal with that transition of your workforce to deal with the people that we really don't need their skills anymore, that's going to be a very difficult political problem to ask and answer. That's above my pay grade. I'm not even getting into that. But inside of a company, it's more tangible because you can actively see, or you have a much smaller subset of processes and things that can be owned. And you can see, from my experience, I've seen the difficulty that there is in leading an organizational change from a people perspective. From the technology is difficult, right? Implementing new projects and products and new technologies into your existing processes and teams is difficult. That's always going to be a challenge um, for AI when it was the cloud and getting a digital transformation actually out the door. Very hard to do. But when you have a technology that people are inherently afraid of, and they actually do not even want to implement. They don't want more automation. They don't want AI doing the job that it took them 3 years to learn how to do or to get right in the way that they do it today. They don't even want this thing to work. So it's becoming more difficult to actually ship these projects beyond a simple pilot program. Not to mention, most large companies have so much bureaucracy in place that it's almost impossible to understand and get buy in from an entire organization to understand, all right, can we do this and are we going to do it? Like, sometimes it's like you're going to do it or you want to do it and you can do it, but it still doesn't get done. Like, that sounds crazy to speak about, but I'm telling you it happened. There are literal conversations where we talk about, all right, this is what we need to get done. This is the timeline that we have, and we should be on the same page. Then if we check in again in a month from now, I promise you there are some teams that will not have done it. And I'm not judging anyone. I'm not saying I can't from my perspective say what the actual problem is that's preventing us from getting this move forward, but there are legitimate problems that are happening and that are leading to the work not being done. So when there are reports that say 95% of AI projects are failing, I believe it. I understand it. They don't make it past the pilot phase because it's very easy to say this is what we want to do. And it's more difficult to say this is what we have done. And it's more difficult to say, all right, this is what we've done in this small scale. Now, how do we get the rest of the organization to adopt this new process or this new technology based on the way we had imagined it to work? Because when you're talking about a large enterprise, when you're talking about Fortune 500 companies, you're talking about thousands of people. One person will have a difficult time adopting something new. Now, if you have to get 10 other people or 1,000 other people or 100 other people, like whatever number is, to adopt this new technology and adopt it while also not dropping the ball on what we've already been doing, right? So you have to both hold the past process and the future process in your mind long enough to really get the future process to match exactly how you had that past project and before you can even start adding new things to it. So operationally, it's not simple to do. And we're seeing that AI, well, since I don't know if this is actually, let's say, I know it's related, right? In the last 2 or 3 years since ChatGPT initially dropped their first 2.5 model, uh, there have been like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of what do you call them, like layoffs inside of major companies in different sectors, in different sizes, right? That's totally true. And at the same time, the CEOs of these companies are saying that we don't even need as many people to hire because we have AI, right? So it's giving the impression that AI is taking the place of the people. But while AI is allegedly taking the place of the people, there are other things happening at the same time that make it more difficult for me to believe that that's really all that it is. There is some offshoring. There is some uh challenges in the economy in general, spending going down, right? Inflation and even tariffs at this point are making it more difficult for these businesses to operate profitably. And so the easiest thing you can do to, improve the bottom line is to get rid of employees, right? Lower your payroll numbers. But once you do that, the remaining workforce that you have is now extra, like, overburdened with their workload. And so when you're trying to get an overburdened team to adopt technology that they're already feeling is going to take their job, you're kind of backing yourself against the wall. And it just becomes more difficult for that change to actually take effect. So this is one more thing I just want to highlight with AI and the transformation that it's having, because there are so many different moving parts and moving pieces right now that it's almost impossible for me to identify where the actual cause is for the hype not landing. But I don't think it's just because the technology doesn't work. I think the technology is really good at what it does, but the teams that's needed to actually implement these changes, some of them are being laid off. So people that understood the process end to end, they're not even at the team anymore. So how do you tell people that just learned about the process to automate this process well enough with a technology that they don't even understand completely yet? It's crazy. I don't know. I understand a little bit about it, but it is crazy if you think about it and look deeper into the stories that these people are telling to their investors. And I think that's kind of some of the challenge that's driving the confusion and vagueness inside of companies internally and externally when we're looking at the actual outlook and the results of what these businesses are doing now. With that being said, let's jump into some of the questions that we have for this week. Thank you to our folks for providing questions. hmm
Should I study computer science in college?
So there are people that are wondering if it's even worth going into computer science and going into tech today, given everything that I just mentioned, right? All of the layoffs inside of tech, big tech especially, and the difficulty that people are finding or having in finding new engineering positions. And the challenge is definitely real. It's not easy to differentiate yourself, especially when there's so much turmoil happening inside of the roles and the companies that you want to go in. But I strongly believe that computer science as a field and as a learning path is still the way to go if you want to really grow as a professional and ensure that you have the foundation and the the skills to actually succeed inside of these roles. Now, it is true that when you're going into university, they don't traditionally cover some of the topics that you're going to need and use day to day as an engineer inside of Google or inside of Chase or any of these other companies. But they do give you the fundamentals of data structures and algorithms. They allow you to practice working inside of a team and clearly articulating your thoughts to someone that needs to understand what you're attempting to do. That formal thinking and those formal skills are still helpful as an engineer and as a developer. And it's something that you I don't recommend that you just give up very easily. Um yes, you can go the coding bootcamp route and you can make sure that you are learning how to use the tools, being like a specific programming language, learning how to do something very specific with AI or cursor, and just making sure you know how to build an app. That's very simple. We can all learn how to build an app, and we can all use uh, AI to write some code. The difference that you get when you're taking it from a like bottom up perspective and that bottom up journey with computer science is that you understand the mental models for how we look at systems. And systems are what software engineers really work on, right? We don't work on code. We work on systems that need to be fault tolerant, systems that need to operate inside of the real world where there are edge cases that you cannot even define until they actually happen. And that training is something that you can only get, like, you can't get the training until you actually do it, and you won't be trusted to do it until you get the training. And a lot of the time you at least get a theoretical understanding of the problem when you're looking at it from a computer science educational standpoint, because you at least understand the theory of, all right, I have this infinite set of uh, variables and possibilities. And I'm dealing with this specific subset of variables that I can control. And if I change this variable, this is the number of possibilities that are possible now based on the variable that I changed. That type of abstract thinking cannot be taught in 90 days or 6 months or even 12 months in a boot camp. Or I won't say it can't be taught, but it's incredibly difficult to teach. A lot of the time, you need someone who just thinks about that all day to kind of sit with you and go back and forth on it with you. Then you need to have peers that are honestly coming from that same background that you're coming from to discuss those ideas with, because that'll help y'all just understand it a little bit better together. And so I don't want to say that everyone should go get a computer science degree, because it's not like everyone is going to do what they need to do with it. You should not be going to any school and taking out $150,000 worth of debt for a CS degree and then not going for any internships and not really focusing on the fundamentals and not building any type of portfolio while you're in school. If you do that, you're going to find that it was a very poor investment and going to have a very difficult time, finding a job or finding some opportunity after you graduate. But if you go study computer science and spend, a very minimal amount and go into minimal debt, if any, and you do some internships and you build a strong network of mentors inside of like your educators, but also mentors in your internships or even at some of the job fairs that you go to, or even building a network on social media like LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you're finding the people that have the skills and experience that you know. If you find those peers and those mentors, then having that degree can dramatically accelerate your potential lifetime earnings. And I just want to highlight that you have to make an intelligent choice for you. If you really feel that you don't need to understand the theory behind engineering and behind the scientific process that computer science and software engineering from a theoretical standpoint will teach you, then you can go for the boot camp and you can just build the apps that you want to build. That's totally possible. That requires a different set of skills and a different set of characteristics that everyone does not have. Everyone does not have the ability to just pick a direction, stay on that direction, and continue forward on that path regardless of the obstacles. Those people need a little bit more support that a university can provide. But if you're not that person, don't even waste your time if you feel like you're gonna waste your time, right?
Is it better to work at a startup or an established company?
So I would highlight that there is no better when you're thinking about the option between a startup and an enterprise or some large company. It really depends on what you're trying to optimize for and what stage you are at currently. So if you are early in your career and you are optimizing for stability and learning, then it may be better to go for a enterprise, a Fortune 500 company or Fortune 1000 company, somewhere where there are a bunch of other people that have been in your shoes and they can actually walk you through some of the problems that you're going to solve, and you just get greater amounts of support there. At those companies, you won't be required to kind of own the system that you are maintaining. And you probably won't even be building much new anyway. You'll really just be maintaining what is already in place. That will give you time, especially if you're driven. to learn about all the different things that you are seeing. You'll learn, all right, this is what a CI/CD pipeline is. This is the tool that we're using to create that pipeline. This is why we do it. Um, and answering those types of questions. For CI/CD pipelines, you'll see that for security and database management. Having a large company behind you gives you the security to know that you can do something and it won't cause a catastrophic problem. I would say even give you more confidence because you know you can point to someone and say, "All right, I have a question on this. This is who I can go to ask that question or to answer that question." If you are going into a startup, you don't have that benefit. In a startup and inside of a smaller team, you are kind of required to own everything that you touch. You are required to own entire business problems and build the solution for them and own that solution end to end, right? So it's definitely more stress. It's definitely more of a burden. And if you don't have the experience already, it's going to require a significant amount, a, a much more significant amount of time from you to actually build everything that needs to be built. So in that case, you get to learn much more quickly, right? Because you have to learn faster, or else the entire company might go under because you didn't bake in observability quickly enough. But it's not a challenge that I would go into lightly. When you go into an established company, you get to see what real scale looks like. You get to see what it looks like when you are dealing with a million or a billion requests per second, and you're dealing with a lot of eyes on you from a regulatory standpoint. You get to see that up front, up close and personal, and see what processes are required to make that work. When you are building from a startup, you can get the benefit of actually going through that exercise. You can see, all right, this is how we go from 0 users to 100 users to 1,000 and then to 1 million, right? And you can see the different decisions that had to be made in order to grow the product or the service along that entire path. For myself, I would say that's something that I'm still missing. I know deep I know like deeply what is required to run a a financial technology company level of transaction and load. I know you can do that with Kubernetes. I know you need to have a service mesh in place to make sure that different applications can talk to each other securely. I know that you need to have all these different things in place. But I never had to go through the decision of knowing when to build it myself. And so getting the experience building products like Toe Pro myself and seeing, all right, this is how we go from not having any money and having to optimize for cost to having some money and having some load and now having to optimize for user experience. And that is a different question than that's a different question that you probably wouldn't always get if you just jump into a company at a specific size or you only work in companies of that certain size. I think it's really helpful that throughout your entire career that you'll be able to look back and say, I have worked with these different sized companies and in these different industries because it does give you the opportunity to say, hey, I like working in a fast paced environment that where I can own something and I can have full ownership of this part of the business. And you can say that, right? Because you know you've done that when there were 10 employees and when there were 50 employees and even up to 100. And then past 100, like I don't like that because now the feeling that I had when it was just 50 of us, I don't get that same feeling anymore. So all right, I like that spot. There's that sweet spot that I like. When you only deal at a certain sized company, you never get that feeling to understand, like, all right, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and you don't get that experience for yourself. So you're just in there being comfortable. If you're just looking for comfort, the question doesn't matter. It might just be which one is more stable, which one gives you the most bang for your buck, where you don't have to go anywhere or do too much. But if you're even thinking about either, you probably don't want to just go with what's easy. You want to do something that really, really means something to you. So I would say think about what is important for you right now and what experience you have to offer to these companies. The big company doesn't care that you understand all of these different aspects of technology. They might really want you to focus on one specific domain and problem that they are hiring for, versus that startup might want to see you have built something 0 to 1. They want to see that you understand how to set up a security scanning pipeline. They want to see that you know how to set up a repository to have rollback access control. They want to see these different experiences under your belt because they might need you to do all of them at some point. So it's up to you, really. But it's always up to you, right?
Why do regulations matter as software developer?
So regulations are the difference between a professional or I would say understanding regulations is the difference between whether you are a professional or whether you're just some hobbyist that knows how to code. If you're gonna just build a project and it's only gonna be you or someone like your friend that uses it, then regulation may not matter. But regulations become especially important when we're talking about software that's going to touch health, money, safety, identity, and then some certain types of public infrastructure. Because you're no longer just writing code, you're writing something that is going to operate inside of the legal system. You're writing something that's going to affect the lives of other people besides yourself. The government probably doesn't care that you haven't encrypted any of the data that you're keeping on your laptop inside of your home when it's your data. You made that decision. Do what you want with it. But when you start thinking about bringing other people into your mess, now there are different people you have to kind of make sure are okay with what you're doing. Now we start thinking about health data. Now you were talking about HIPAA. When you're thinking about data privacy and just information in general, that's GDPR. And then if you're thinking about like a family's wealth and assets. Now we're talking about SEC regulations, and those all create different obligations that you must abide by because you can ship very good code, you can ship flawless code, but if you do not understand and implement some of the regulations and the controls that these policies say you must have, then you will go to prison. And there's nothing you can do about that at that point. Um, most developers think that regulation is only for legal departments and that the lawyers care about regulation and how we, uh, or legal department lawyers and auditors care about regulations and controls. But at the end of the day, everything we build and touch has been built with some type of regulation or requirement in place. If you ever thought about AWS and how encryption, RBAC, and audits are so deeply baked into the AWS ecosystem, how when you create an S3 bucket, the defaults and the recommendations say private everything, no public. The default is to encrypt the data inside of the file system inside of the S3 buckets or even the EC2 instances that you create. Uh, when you think about the fact that Kubernetes, it talks about RBAC, but it also talks about making sure that your service mesh is not allowing uh, different namespaces to communicate with each other without service accounts, and that you're not neglecting the fact that we need network policy. That's literally regulation showing up inside of the code and the systems that we use every day. But if you don't understand that this is how it ties back to the law and what we have to comply with from a regulation standpoint, you're missing something critical and you're missing something that can become a significant challenge for you and your business over time. So, really think about the tools that you use every day and how they are specifically geared to solving some of these regulatory problems that um, I mentioned. They're having controls in place for auditing actions that are made by users, having a concept of multiple users. If user management didn't matter, if user management would not get you a fine, then there wouldn't be a need to have a way to create different users. We could all just use the root access account and you'll definitely get that app to work if you run it in root, right? When you think about all these controls in place that we use every day, but we never thought about the fact that it's regulation and that regulation has become so ingrained inside of technology that you just use it, but you got to understand why you're using it. That's really the whole point.
How should you introduce yourself to your new team?
So when you're joining a new team and you are going in there and really representing yourself, you want to make sure that you're not just sharing the facts about who you are. You have to set an expectation about the type of work that you do. You have to signal to the people that you are working with that you are the person that not only has been hired for this role, that you are the best person to solve the problem that this role has been intended to solve, right? When they're, whatever team you're going to is hiring someone for a specific role, they are doing more than just saying, I need to increase my headcount. They have, or they should have, thought very deeply about the problem, the specific defined problem that they are trying to solve. And they have searched long and hard for the one person who can solve the problem in their budget, right? And so you are the person that is answering that call. So the story that you give to them on day one and even beyond is the story that you want to use to make them feel confident in their decision. So be intentional about what you're expressing in terms of your philosophy, what you're expressing in terms of your background and your experience. I'm not saying go through every credential that you have because every credential may or may not be important to share, but it is worth understanding that hey, if we're in a fintech company, have you worked in fintech before? If we're dealing with a security focused team, that we need to make sure that everything that we share with this team or with external teams and stakeholders is accurate. Have you ever worked in that type of environment where you are accountable to an audit? Have you ever worked in a type of environment where the attention to detail is critical to us succeeding as a function, right? You have to be very clear about what they're looking for or what they were looking for when they hired you. And then even because everyone on the team may not have been involved inside of your hiring process, right? So you need to make sure that you're also making those people that were not involved feel comfortable that you are the right person that they can come to with a question or answer now based on your new role. And I would say keep it short and sweet for that initial group introduction. You don't want to take a lot of time out of everyone's day just to tell them who you are. It's not show and tell, right? You're not giving a whole presentation on this. You just want them to understand that you are here to do this job, and that you are going to do it in this way. Now, after that initial introduction, where you have kind of the group knows who you are, know that you exist and are on the team. Now, I would suggest that you schedule some one-on-one interviews, or I'll say interviews, but one-on-one conversations with other people on the team, so that you can introduce yourself to them and get a more clear signal sent to them about what you need from them and what they can get from you. And you can show a little bit more of your personality. You can go into more specifics when appropriate about your background, or even where you want to go in your career journey, or what goals you have for this current team that you're on. You don't want to give that all into a whole group, because they're not like they're gonna ask you questions during your day one intro on the group call. That group call was probably not even about you. It just so happened that we all on the call. Might as well let them say a few words, right? So, and be prepared for that. Like, be prepared that you might have just joined the team, and at some point you've been working with one or two people, and you've introduced yourself to them. But there's gonna be a day where there's more people on the team, and they just say, "Hey, welcome to the team, KD. Uh, you know, introduce yourself. Who are you?" And you have to be prepared to speak on your own behalf. You have to be prepared to speak confidently and clearly. Otherwise, you might just shoot yourself in the foot, because they really won't trust you the rest of the time that you are on that team. So keep that in mind.
How can I make my application logs useful for debugging?
So when we are working on any type of software, the greatest challenge that you're going to have after you get the app to work is to understand what the app is doing while it is working. Most software is a black box. Most software is going to work well until it doesn't. When it doesn't is when your application logs are going to be the most important. And that's why you have to build those logs and build that logging system or that logging policy with the expectation that this is necessary for when things break and when things don't work. So you should be including enough detail to help you solve a problem, help you diagnose some type of issue without having to reproduce that issue yourself inside of the code, right? Like, I shouldn't need to know that there was a problem with Stripe initializing. Well, I shouldn't need to run the app to know that there was a problem with Stripe. I should know in the logs, hey, something happened with Stripe here. And because the app logs told me that, I should know that it timed out at this step, right? If you think about your application and the system that you're building as a multi-step process, as a system with multiple things happening step by step, stepwise, then you should have your logs set up in a place where it'll tell you, hey, this is how far we got. And then when we got to this step, this is what we saw, and this is how it differed from what we expected it to be. That's the type of conversation you want your application to tell you through those logs. And it's difficult sometimes to know is it when you should add a log and how much information is useful, because you don't want to add too much, right? You don't want to start logging everything because then it becomes noisy. Then it becomes, how do I tell the difference between something that is working normally and something that is breaking and on fire right now? So that's when you have differences between the log levels, right? Whether you're logging something for informational purposes or you're logging something that is an error or debugging, right? Having that difference defined inside of how you're logging is going to be incredibly important. Having some way to trace a request across your system is going to be incredibly important because you want to know, again, what's happening at any given moment. And then you may want to debug a specific request that happened at this time. And having those request logs with traces inside of them are going to make your job much easier there. And then somehow think about logging. Again, regulatory requirements are always important to understand because some logs are required to comply with the law. And there are some rules for how you can log. Like you should not be logging PII information. You should not be logging someone's social security number or their phone number or even their full name or their email. But you may need to log that this user using some type of difficult, not, I don't know how you would define it, but using some type of user ID that can be referenced to a user but is not directly leaking some of their information. Knowing that you are logging that information somewhere and logging it reliably where you can find it 7 years from now, because that might be the requirement. It might be that you have to keep logs and records of what this system has done for the next 5, 10 or months or even years. And if you don't have those policies in place, if you don't have a process in place for doing that, you're going to run into some challenges. And then sometimes you might even have default logs set up with something like AWS where you can say that you want to keep your logs, but if you don't have some type of uh, log policy that can expire some of the logs that you don't need, or you don't move them to a cheaper bucket, right? You don't need everything inside of uh, the standard bucket. You might be able to use one of the glacier buckets that are more cost effective to not access over time. So keep that in mind for how you're thinking about application logging. And have a framework in place for any application that you're building for understanding what needs to be logged and how it should be logged. And there are frameworks for every language for getting structured logging. Make sure you are using those standard libraries as much as possible because they will make your job easier. Because logging shouldn't be the pain point that you're solving for. Logging, structured logging, and JSON logging has been that's been solved a, a lot of different ways already. You need to figure out how to solve the problem for making sure that you are logging exactly what needs to be logged, where, and for how long. And that's all we had today for our questions. If this was helpful, leave a comment below, like, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know where I could have expanded, right, to clarify something if you don't understand the information. And let me know where, you know, there could be some gaps in what was explained. Before we drop off, I do want to just share some final thoughts that I had really about AI and agency, because I know a lot of people have come to rely on artificial intelligence and automation to kind of think for them. And they've kind of neglected the part of their mind that should be responsible for doing the hard work. And I know it's easy to do that. I know it's easy to indulge yourself with, just doing the light work, asking, I make this email for me, and then just sending the email, right? I know it's easy to do that, but when we do that, we don't allow ourselves to have the to learn. One, you don't get to learn as well as you would learn if you were to go through the practice of iterating either what your initial thought was with AI, or in iterating on and revising what AI gave you. You're kind of letting your mind just become stale in that sense. And then you also are not putting your best forward when you're letting AI do it. You're putting the kind of AI is not garbage from the standpoint that it just generates garbage all the time. It can actually generate some pretty cool things. But if you are not pushing it forward, it's really giving you that baseline. And that baseline that an automated system can create and generate is nowhere near as exceptional as what you can do with your own human natural intelligence. So I really encourage everyone to think about when and when not to recruit AI to help them do the work. And thinking about AI as a helpmate and not just a handicap, right? It's not going to work for you no matter what you prompt it to do, no matter how good it gets at clicking around the screen and uh, taking action. It's never going to do the thing that your creativity would have done if you had done it yourself. So I would rather we not find that out on accident, because the thing that we thought was great because we asked ChatGPT to do it turned out not to be so great. I would rather you practice and read what AI is giving you, and then learn that you could have done better yourself if you had just done it. So I'm really just encouraging you to do the work and understand that the information was never the blocker, because now information is at your fingertips. You have all the information to know what to do, but we still require you to go out and do it. And just that's it. Go out, do the work, get it done, and you'll learn and you'll create something cool. Maybe not the first time, maybe not even the second time, but at some point, the thing that you are building will look like something worth looking at. And that'll be very exciting for you and the people that care for you and support you. So, that being said, I am logging out. Peace out, my people. Enjoy your week. Be great, be safe, and I will see y'all next Sunday.